Welcome to the I AMU podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nitza Alvarez, a board-certified cardiologist and best-selling author. My hope with this podcast is to share stories so women can speak up and become the CEO of their own health. I am a cardiologist. I am a wife. I am a mother. My story is your story. I am you. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I AMU podcast. Today I have the privilege and the blessing to have Miss Karin join us to share her story in the healthcare system. Karin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I am you saw me how excited I was when I saw you, and I am so grateful that you say yes to the call and that you have the courage to come here and tell us your story. Because although I have been taking care of you for a few years now, when I met you, your journey didn't look very helpful to you. And I feel that when we look at somebody that is as young as you, it is super important for the woman out there that might be going through the same journey, or that might go through the same journey, or that might have a spouse or a daughter that go through the same journey, to know that there is hope, that there are resources out there for them, and that they don't have to settle for an okay or mediocre healthcare.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into your story. You are, may I say your age?
Yes.
You are 47 years young, and you were diagnosed with cardiac problems very early in your life. No?
Yes.
So when do you find out that you have heart disease, and what was that heart disease, so our listeners can relate to this?
I found out when I was 40 years old in 2018. I went into congestive heart failure. Thought I had the flu. Went to the hospital and find out, here you have congestive heart failure. And was like, oh my God.
You're 40 years old.
40
so it's like
years
congestive heart
old,
failure. What does that
yes.
even mean? So what is congestive heart failure?
It's where your heart is not functioning and you fill up with fluid. Mm-hmm. It's basically you're drowning in your own fluid.
But even though you were drowning in your own fluid, then you thought that you had the flu.
Because I was coughing, but I had coughed for years. And thought it was an allergy cough. And I never went to get checked out. Busy working, taking care of kids. I felt okay other than this cough that for years would never go away.
Did you have any problems during your pregnancy?
Yes, with my oldest son. They found a heart murmur when I was 19 when I had him. And when I had him early because I had preeclampsia, so I had him 4 weeks early. Then they did an echo a few weeks later and found out I was born with a bicuspid aorta valve. And they said, that when I'm probably 50, I may have to have open heart surgery.
And you're like, well, I'm 19, I have time.
I didn't think about it again, and the crazy thing is I was a vet tech at the time. So I know what congestive heart failure is with animals. I know the symptoms. And we would joke and say, and dogs have heartworms. They get heartworm coughs. And so we would joke and say, that's my heartworm cough. Not even relating to actually my heart could be the cause of it. Just thinking it's just allergies.
When you were 19 years old and you were pregnant from your son and you were told you have a bicuspid valve, which for the listener, this is a congenital problem. You were born with this. Mm-hmm. Patients that had that type of valve problems, eventually they will require to have a valve replacement because the valve end up working inappropriately and doesn't open well. Those patients need close follow-up because we never know when that problem is going to arise, or also they can develop insufficiency of the valve. And then not only you have valve disease, which was discovered then, you also have preeclampsia, which is a risk factor for heart disease in women. Did anybody, preeclampsia, for those are listening to us that don't know, it's like I have high blood pressure during my pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And Did your providers warn you that this was going to become a risk factor for life for you, that once you develop preeclampsia, your risk for heart disease increases later on in life?
They did not go in depth.
Did they tell you keep monitoring your blood pressure? Your blood pressure might come up again later on.
They just warned me not to get pregnant again.
So that's how bad it was.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you have another pregnancy?
I did 6 years later.
And what happened with that
I
pregnancy?
was fine. I had no issues with him during my whole pregnancy. I carried him full term. I did not swell, and I did not have any blood pressure issues. So it was like
then
night
you're
and
like,
day.
Oh, I'm fine.
Yes.
I'm fine
But
now.
then I made
Perhaps
sure.
you thought like, okay, so I'm good. And so you didn't, that we're talking about 6 years later, you had another baby, and then, but you did very well with this one, which perhaps
Correct.
made you believe like, well,
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Did they reevaluate your heart back then? No.
No, nothing else. I had not seen a cardiologist since my early 20s at that time.
Did anybody suggest that you do it at that time, or you were under the impression that I'm going to wait until I'm older, and that's when I had to get checked?
I just figured, well, if something happens, then I'll go get checked.
Got it. So now something happened. You ended up in the
Yes.
hospital. You ended up in the hospital thinking that you have flu, which for the listeners, I think that is super valuable to give them the message that, well, if you're not a doctor and you don't know what you're treating, you probably want to get checked because, it's pretty bad to have congested heart failure. And who knows for how many weeks or months were you experiencing that before you actually said, you know what, this is getting so bad.
And the crazy thing is, I had been under a doctor's care. I had been seeing my primary.
for the flu?
No.
For the cough?
For neck and shoulder pain. And I was gaining weight, like at 5 pounds every time I'd go in. And she's like, Karen, you're gaining weight. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything different. I don't know what's causing it. Well, that's the fluid, but we didn't know. So I had gone months seeing her every 2 weeks and just constantly gaining weight, and she didn't catch it. And the last time I was in there, like a week before I went in the hospital, when she went to listen to my lungs, and my back was sweating, and I told her I have the clammy sweats all the time. She didn't pick up on the symptoms, and I showed her my legs where I had the spots in my legs where my legs had been swelling, and the fluid was in there.
So you think that at that moment, retrospectively, she didn't have the knowledge to identify that you were experiencing a decompensation of heart failure?
Correct.
So you ended up in the hospital, and they found that your valve needed to be taken care of?
Yes, I had 2 valves that were leaking and an aneurysm on my aorta that needed to be repaired.
And you are 41 years old.
Yes.
So in 2019, they took you to the operating room and fixed the valves?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I waited because I had to. Here's another thing. I had to find my own surgeon.
How come?
Insurance at the time. Nobody around here in Lake County wanted to touch me.
Because they didn't take your insurance?
They didn't take my insurance, and the hospital, because of where I was at, they didn't feel comfortable doing the surgery there.
Mostly because you were too high risk for
Correct.
what they could provide for you there.
Correct. So I had to find my own surgeon and make a few phone calls, and calling one surgeon directed me to another surgeon, and that surgeon took my insurance and did my surgery. I read the reviews and did my research on him before my appointment, and
So there was a little bit of delay on your care
Right.
because of your insurance situation.
Correct.
No, so you had to be your own advocate. You had to move on, start looking for providers,
Yes.
and that is actually, I think, is a good message for our audience to, sometimes yes, we have to put a little effort. It's easier when you have a system that facilitates it, but if you have to do what is best for you. You have to do
Right.
what is required for you. At this point, you were very, very sick.
Right.
And without having those valves fixed, your heart could not have a chance to recover. Right. So they fixed your valve.
Yes.
And how did you did after the surgery, after the procedure, by the way? Did you recover easily?
It was, yeah, I had a normal recovery, but they said, oh, you're going to be good to go. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go back to life before this and I'm going to feel so much better. And that did not happen. I felt just as bad and couldn't figure out why. And going to the cardiologist they sent me to after my surgery to see him on a regular basis. And every time they would do an echo, my heart function was just worse. Where it went from, 30, 35 to 30, 25. And then I'm like, why is it getting worse and not better?
So just for the audience, so they understand, the listeners, when we measure the ability of the heart from pumping blood, we measure a percentage of blood that comes out of the heart with every heartbeat. So we call that the ejection fraction, which I actually, sometimes in my talks, I say, know your numbers. Ejection fraction is one of those numbers. And a normal human heart will pump about 55, 65% of that blood, plus or minus 5. So yours was in the 10, 15% range. It was getting worse from the 20s to lower, getting lower and lower after the surgery.
After, yeah.
And you were not feeling good.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
So what was done for you at that moment? What was done for you?
Well, he suggested I get a defibrillator. I sat on the thought of that, to implant a device. And I finally said, okay, let's do it. Well, they have to get, insurance approval. Well, insurance comes back. They don't have enough information. So they denied the defibrillator. How much more information do you need? I'm dying. Well, so talking to him, he just said, well, there's nothing else I can do for you. Sorry, we're behind the 8 ball on this one. At 44 years old, sent me home from his office in tears that I was going home to die. And I cried for 3 days. And I finally got my head straight and I said, no, there has to be somebody who can help me. This is not the end for me. So I went back to my primary and I said, I want a new cardiologist. There's somebody who can help me. And she referred me to you. And
so was your primary care doctor?
It was
that
my
said, okay, so let's have this other doctor take a look at you and see what
with
they can
me
offer
push.
for you.
Yes, when I pushed for it. If not, I would have kept going to the other one and not been here.
So you advocated for your own self.
Yes.
Which, this is very valuable for the audience because when you are in a position like that you're so vulnerable, you're 44 years old, you are told you're going to die. Like, there's nothing else that we can do. And granted, it's important for the listener to know that an AICD, which is a defibrillator, is implanted, is similar to a pacemaker, is implanted to prevent you from dying suddenly from a cardiac arrhythmia, because patients that have weak hearts tend to die suddenly from cardiac arrhythmias. But that was not going to make you feel better. No. That was just strictly to save you, which, of course, you're 44 years old, you have a heart that is super weak, but what are we doing to keep the heart, make the heart get stronger? But for the audience that, this was very drastic for you, you're going to die. There's nothing that we can do. You're going to die. Right. And then you had to go home with the thought of, okay, there's nothing else. You could have settled for that. Yeah. And then said, well, I guess I'm going to die. And this is how I had to live. But something inside you told you, no, I think that there's something that can be done. At least seeking a second opinion. Right. If somebody else tells me the same thing, then I guess that it is what it is. No, right. But understanding, what made you think that perhaps there was something else to do? Like when you were those 3 days, and I cannot even imagine, because you have your family, you had your kids, your children, and how you tell them, I don't think I have much to live.
Right.
What makes you say, I don't know that this is actually right?
I'm like, technology these days, and that one person may not feel they can help you, and somebody else may have resources. And that's what I expected to hear from the other cardiologist, that he would say, let me reach out. You have colleagues and, other doctors. And I thought maybe he would make a phone call, kind of get a ball rolling in some direction, maybe find somebody who might be able to help me. So he didn't even
So at that point, you felt like, okay, this is definitely not going to help me. Like that was like your own partner in the healthcare is already throwing the towel and say there's nothing that we can do. So then you felt like you're in the streets now. It's like, okay, what do I do now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Karin, when you came and see me, you were very sick.
Yes.
You were very, very sick. No,
Yes.
and whenever we receive patients, like first of all, in my job is to facilitate the care for my patients, become their advocate, but also get them in the journey where they can recover the quality of life. And we're not going to get into details of everything that we did, but I hooked you up to the heart failure transplant specialist. I said, you're too young. You can even get a new heart. If it comes to that, we can give you a new heart. So there was a lot of hope. A lot of hope. No, we're going to adjust your medications. Yes, we're going to work for that defibrillator that your insurance didn't approve, but it will have approved if your provider would have insisted that you need it. Yes?
Right, yes.
Which is what we did. And I'm having this conversation here enough to say, I did this, I did this, I did this. No, it's not about that. It's about hope for the people that are listening to us,
Right.
that they can find a provider that really, 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 really partner with you and said, okay, what would you do if I was your daughter?
Right.
Will you say, oh, sorry, you're going to die? Or will you make 10,000 phone calls if you had to make 10,000 phone calls to make it happen? Mm-hmm. So you went to see the heart failure transplant specialist. They help us with the optimization of your medical therapy as we're working. And then they finally said, don't come back.
Yes.
Why?
Because I was doing so much better. My heart was functioning so much better. And they said, stay with Dr. Alvarez. Unless you need us, you don't have to come back.
Isn't that a great news?
Yes.
It's like, don't come back.
Yes.
And please don't need us again.
Yes. Because I knew how close I was to having to be on that list, that transplant list. And that terrified me.
Of course. But at the same time, it gave you hope.
It gave me hope, but at the same
it's terrifying.
time,
It's a major issue. But then
Yes.
once you have somebody that is in that journey where this is a big deal.
Yes.
So it's so relieving when they said, you don't need us anymore.
Yes.
It's like, yes, 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 yes. I dodged the ball right
Yes.
here. Yes. So, of course, the journey doesn't end there. No, so it requires, you got your defibrillator, you've been on the proper treatment. And again, this is actually the point of once you receive the proper treatment, you feel better, you have better quality of life. And the amazing thing is that now you can focus on you, on what you want to do with your life. You recently had an intervention to help you lose weight because you want to be healthy.
Right.
Because you want to be healthy.
Right.
Because now you had another chance to live, and we got to make it meaningful.
Right. And I was told, well, going back a minute, from the other cardiologist, I was told I needed a heart transplant, that I would not qualify for that because of my weight.
But that's not what the heart transplant specialist told you.
And I was waiting when I met you to hear the same thing. And
Why?
Because
you've been hearing it for so long.
Because I had heard it. And you never said one thing about my weight, and neither did
the heart failure specialist.
Yeah, he never said a word, that my weight never came up. So I was like, okay.
The weight didn't come up as a explanation to why we're not going to serve you properly.
Right.
The weight was never an excuse to, like when we hear how many patients justify their symptoms because they're overweight, or they stop saying that they're short of breath, for example, because the answer that they always get is, well, you're overweight. And it's like, really? Like everything is going to go back to my weight? Granted, yes, we know that there are some things that are going to be related to weight, but weight is not going to kill you. If we were to focus on your weight, to deny you care, to delay your care, and your heart was going to kill you before your weight.
Oh, yes.
So for you heard it so many times.
Right.
Well, you're too obese. You're not gonna be able to get a heart, and that was just an opinion of an individual.
Right. And after having the heart surgery, then I had a snowball of other issues, other health problems that came up. diabetes. It affected I started noticing my vision, thyroid. It's just, it's not just from one, it was like my whole body was just fighting against me.
And here we're again talking about a woman in her 40s.
Yes.
Yes. So another message is like, who told us that age is actually a criteria to discriminate if somebody is having a heart condition or not? No, age is definitely not.
No.
In your case, I think that one of the other messages that I want our audience to take home is Karin had an echocardiogram when she was 19. She was lucky to have an echocardiogram when she was 19. And because she was having symptoms, they heard a murmur that prompted that echocardiogram. But if it wasn't for that, you would not have known that you have a congenital problem. Yes? So that is the importance of you don't know until you know, because you think that everything is okay, but the question is, how do you know that everything is okay? Right. And in your case, again, blessing, there was a murmur, let's check it. Unfortunately, there was no proper follow-up after that, but you know what, fast forward, you're doing amazing today.
Right.
But the idea is that every woman had the opportunity to get checked, because no symptoms doesn't mean that everything is okay.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So how do you your healthcare providers, would you say in general, were reacting to you? Do you feel that you were served properly?
At the beginning, no. But once started getting answers and realizing what was going on, yes, they listened to me. I have a handful of doctors now, and everybody seems to listen to me when I say this is going on, or should we do this? What do you think about trying this? And they listen to me. I'm comfortable and happy with the doctors that I have now.
Every woman that is a gestational age, every woman that can get pregnant, every woman that during pregnancy develop a complication like you did, need to know that preeclampsia and gestational diabetes are major risk factor for heart disease. And I think that is another challenge that we encounter in our system, where you are under the care of an OB while you're pregnant, and then you go away. No, sometimes that same OB is your gynecologist. But the lack of communication with our patients, our female patients, when they develop that type of complication during pregnancy, I think that for you, you're 19, young,
Yeah.
you feel good, you don't worry about problems, no.
Right.
But if the providers who are in charge and responsible of you don't emphasize enough the importance that preeclampsia and gestational diabetes have for the future, then if they drill it on you, perhaps you would have been a lot more proactive.
Yes.
And if somebody gave you the right, accurate information about you have a congenital heart problem and you need to follow up on that, then you wouldn't be thinking, 30 years from now, I go and get checked. So for the audience that is listening to us, that are young, that are planning to get pregnant, or that have already gone through pregnancy and develop preeclampsia or gestational diabetes, I'm inviting them to be mindful that this is going to be a lifetime risk factor for them for heart disease, and they don't want to sit on it. They want to continue to monitor their sugar, their blood pressure. And what would you like to tell, what would you say to your younger self? That girl, if you could find her again, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to see a cardiologist on a regular basis, at least yearly. To keep up with what's going on inside, because you can't see from the outside in what's happening. You know, and just because things feel normal doesn't mean that they are normal. And maybe this might have been caught sooner, but maybe, and again, there was a reason. I feel that maybe things happened the way they did, so I could meet you. That that there's
the
a
worst
path,
of the circumstances,
right?
But we made it.
That there's a path that I think that we're meant to be on, and our paths were meant to cross. That you saved my life.
I can tell you that for me, it's been my honor to care for you, because when you came to my office that day, I saw myself in you, and I'm like, you are so young and at the same time so sick, that I made it my mission. Like, this is what I live for. I live for this particular situations when we have this woman in the system that is neglecting them, women that are not being seen, women that have been misdiagnosed, that are not receiving the proper treatment,
Right.
and come to me and I make them get better. But that has to go beyond me. It has to go and it has to be a system. And that's what we are here today. We're here today so when people listen to your story, they're more proactive, but also inviting the entire community of physicians to help us spread the word and get prepared to treat women like you when they stand in front of them being that sick, rather than tell them, go home and die. I am so, so, so grateful that you're here. I'm grateful to God that our path crossed.
Yes.
And I'm grateful that you accepted the invitation to come here today.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
And I'm so glad that your name never got to get on that transplant list.
Yes.
And we're going to continue to work. This is a long journey. It's
Yes.
a lifelong journey, you know? And I'm very
Yes.
happy that you have taken this seriously. We probably have another 56 years. No. I cannot give you to 103. I can only give you 100. I can only give you 100.
I don't know that I want to be around that long, but
We're gonna do
whatever
53.
however long I'm supposed to be.
And after that, the warranty expires.
Okay.
And then we go 10,000 miles at a time. Okay. So, Karin, thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you for having me.
This is it for today's episode of I AMU podcast. Thank you for joining us. I hope this episode has empowered you to be the CEO of your own health. Tune into our next episode, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at NITZAMD. To explore more on this and related topics, visit our website, NITZAMD.com. If this episode resonated with you, please like and subscribe. And one more thing, share with the wonderful woman in your life.